the surprising truth about why we struggle to change. And here's the thing, change, real change, is hard. We all know that. But why is it so difficult? Why do we set goals, make promises, and then, more often than not, find ourselves right back where we started? We've all been there, whether it's trying to break a bad habit, push ourselves out of our comfort zones, or become someone we've always wanted to be. Yet, something holds us back. What is it? Here's where it gets interesting. On the surface, we might think change is about willpower. If we just try harder, if we just want it badly enough, we'll make it happen. But deep down, there's a much bigger, more philosophical reason why change feels like a constant uphill battle. And it starts with how our brains are wired. Let me explain. S are creatures of habit. We're biologically programmed to seek out patterns, routines, and stability. Our brains have evolved to prioritize safety and efficiency, which means they love the familiar. Even if the familiar is bad for us, like a bad habit or a toxic relationship, there's a part of us that clings to it because it feels safe. It's predictable. It's what we know. And that's what makes change so difficult. It's a leap into the unknown. And the unknown, that's terrifying. Now, think about this for a second. How often have you wanted to change something in your life, but the comfort of staying the same felt safer than the uncertainty of something new? It's like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that you could jump and soar, but at the same time, being so scared of the fall that you stay rooted in place. That fear of the unknown is one of the biggest barriers to change. We're not just afraid of failing, we're afraid of what we don't know. But here's the surprising truth: if we really want to change, we have to stop viewing the unknown as something to fear. Instead, we need to see it as a space of possibility, a blank canvas where anything is possible. The unknown is where growth happens. It's where we evolve. But to step into it, we first need to understand why we resist it so much, and that's where philosophy comes in.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let's go deeper. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." What does that mean? Well, think about it. The moment you realize you have the freedom to change, to make different choices, to step into a new version of yourself, it's dizzying. Because with that freedom comes responsibility. And responsibility, that's heavy. It means you can no longer blame your circumstances or your past for where you are. You have to own your choices. You have to own your life. And that kind of accountability, it's scary. So, let me ask you, how much of your resistance to change is really about fear of failure, and how much of it is about fear of freedom? What if the real struggle isn't that change is hard, but that change forces you to confront the fact that you are in control of your life in ways you've never fully embraced? That's a deep question, right? But it's one that cuts to the heart of why change is such a struggle. Now, let's talk about another reason why we resist change: identity. Who we are, or at least who we think we are, is wrapped up in our habits, our routines, our behaviors. When you try to change, you're not just changing a habit, you're challenging your sense of self. Let's say you've been someone who's always struggled with procrastination. If you suddenly become super productive, it's not just your behavior that changes. Your whole identity shifts, and that shift, it can be destabilizing. We fear that if we change too much, we might lose ourselves in the process. But here's the thing: you're not losing yourself by changing. You're evolving. You're becoming more of who you're meant to be. The problem is, we often cling to our past identities because they feel safe, even if they're no longer serving us. So here's another question: what part of your identity are you holding on to that's keeping you from changing? And more importantly, who could you become if you let that part of yourself go? This brings us to the next big insight. Change isn't just about action, it's about mindset. You can't force yourself to change if deep down you don't truly believe you can. That's why so many people fail when they set out to change. They're trying to change their behavior without changing the way they think about themselves. Real change requires a shift in perspective, a shift in how you see yourself and the world around you. So, how do we do that? How do we shift our mindset in a way that makes change not just possible, but inevitable? It starts with belief. You have to believe that change is not just something you can do, it's something you are doing right now. At this moment, you have to stop waiting for some future version of yourself to appear and start acting as if you've already become that person. The illusion of control, why we sabotage our own progress. All right, here's where things get really interesting. We often think that we're fully in control of our lives, our decisions, and our ability to change. We tell ourselves, I'll start tomorrow, or I just need more discipline. But what if the real issue isn't a lack of control, but that we're clinging to an illusion of control? What if, deep down, we're sabotaging our own progress, not because we're incapable of change, but because we're afraid of what might happen if we actually succeed? Let me explain. We like to believe that we're rational beings, that if we set a goal, we can follow a clear path to achieve it. But the truth is, humans are complex. We're not driven purely by logic. We're driven by subconscious fears, desires, and yes, even contradictions. And one of the biggest contradictions we face is that while we say we want to change, a part of us is terrified of what that change will bring. Think about it. When you set a goal to change something in your life, whether it's to quit a bad habit, get healthier, or pursue a new career, what you're really doing is disrupting the status quo. You're introducing uncertainty into your life. And as we talked about earlier, uncertainty is scary. But here's the twist, it's not just the fear of failure that stops us. It's the fear of success. Success changes things in ways we can't always predict. If you succeed in changing, you might lose relationships that were based on your old habits. You might have to step into new responsibilities or face higher expectations. Success means stepping into the unknown in a way that can feel just as destabilizing as failure. So, subconsciously, we sabotage ourselves. We cling to the illusion of control by staying exactly where we are, because that feels safer than stepping into the unpredictable world of success and growth. Here's a deep question for you. What part of you is afraid of success? Not failure, but success. What would happen in your life if you actually achieved the change you're striving for? What relationships, patterns, or comforts might you have to leave behind? This brings us to another crucial point. We often overestimate how much control we have over the process of change. We think if we just work harder, if we just grind more, we'll get there. But what if change isn't something you can force? What if change is something you have to allow? Let's go philosophical for a moment. The ancient Taoists had this idea of Wu Wei, which means effortless action or non-doing. It's the concept that sometimes the best way to achieve something is by not trying to force it. Imagine trying to push a river upstream. You can try as hard as you want, but the river will keep flowing in the direction it's meant to go. Change works the same way. When you try to force it, you're often working against your natural flow. But when you allow the process to unfold, when you stop trying to control every detail, change becomes a lot easier. But here's the catch: allowing doesn't mean being passive. It means being in tune with yourself, understanding your fears, and working with them, not against them. It means recognizing that control is an illusion, and that the real power comes from embracing the flow of life, accepting that you can't control everything, but you can control your mindset and your willingness to adapt. So, how do we stop sabotaging ourselves? First, we have to acknowledge that we're doing it. This requires brutal honesty. It's easy to blame circumstances, other people, or lack of time for our inability to change. But the truth is, until you face the fact that you're afraid of what change might bring, you'll keep getting in your own way. Here's something to reflect on. What are you holding onto that's keeping you from moving forward? Is it a fear of the unknown? A fear of losing control? Or maybe even a fear of the responsibility that comes with success? Whatever it is, acknowledging it is the first step to breaking free from self-sabotage. Once you've done that, the next step is to let go of the need to control everything. Focus on the process, not the outcome. Trust that if you put in the effort and stay open to the journey, the results will follow. This doesn't mean you sit back and do nothing. It means you stop trying to force change and start allowing it. You shift your focus from controlling every detail to being present, adaptable, and open to whatever comes your way. So, here's the real question. Are you willing to let go of the illusion of control? Are you willing to stop sabotaging yourself and trust that the change you seek is possible, even if it doesn't happen exactly the way you planned? Because once you do that, once you release the need for control, you open yourself up to possibilities that you never could have imagined. The comfort of suffering, why we stay stuck in what hurts us. Let's be real for a second. Pain is uncomfortable. Suffering is something we try to avoid at all costs, right? But here's the paradox. Sometimes we choose to stay in situations that cause us pain. We cling to habits, relationships, or mindsets that hurt us, even when we know they're bad for us. Why? Why would anyone stay stuck in something that feels so wrong? The surprising truth is that suffering can be comfortable. Not in the sense that it feels good, but in the sense that it's familiar. We know how to navigate it. We know what to expect. There's a strange kind of security in knowing your pain, in understanding the boundaries of your suffering. Because stepping out of that suffering means stepping into the unknown, and as we've already discussed, the unknown can be terrifying. Think about it. How many times have you stayed in a situation, maybe it's a toxic relationship, maybe it's a job that drains you because the idea of leaving felt more overwhelming than staying? The discomfort of the familiar can feel safer than the uncertainty of change. And that's one of the reasons we struggle to break free from what hurts us. Here's a deep question for you to consider. Is there a part of you that finds comfort in your own suffering? Not because it's enjoyable, but because it's predictable. Change requires us to confront the unknown, and sometimes that's scarier than the pain we're already experiencing. There's another layer to this too. When we suffer, it often becomes part of our identity. We start to see ourselves as the person who's always struggling, always fighting against the odds. And in a strange way, that identity can give us meaning. It can give us a reason to keep going. But the danger here is that we become attached to our suffering. It becomes a story. We tell ourselves a story that keeps us stuck. Let's go philosophical again. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering," and he's right. We do need to find meaning in life's inevitable struggles. But there's a fine line between finding meaning in suffering and becoming defined by it. When you start to see your suffering as who you are, rather than something you're experiencing, you trap yourself in it. So, how do we break free from the comfort of suffering? First, we need to recognize when we're holding on to it. This takes a lot of self-reflection. Ask yourself, what part of my pain am I unwilling to let go of? And more importantly, who would I be without it? Once you've identified that, the next step is to realize that stepping into the unknown, while scary, is the only way to truly escape the cycle of suffering. You have to be willing to let go of the familiar, painful comfort of the past in order to embrace the uncertainty of the future. Yes, it's risky, but staying stuck in what hurts you is a far greater risk. The real you had to become the person you've always wanted to be. Alright, so we've talked about why change is hard, why we sabotage ourselves, and why we sometimes find comfort in suffering. But now, let's get to the core of it. How do you become the person you've always wanted to be? Here's the truth: that version of yourself, the one you dream about becoming, isn't some distant, unreachable figure. It's already inside you, waiting to surface. The problem is, we often bury that version of ourselves under layers of fear, doubt, and societal expectations. We spend so much time trying to be who we think we should be, or who others want us to be, that we lose sight of who we really are. But here's the good news: every time you take a step toward change, no matter how small, you're chipping away at those layers. You're getting closer to the real you. The first step is understanding that becoming the person you want to be isn't about creating something new. It's about uncovering what's already there. Think about it. How many times have you hesitated to take action because you didn't feel ready? Because you thought you needed more skills, more experience, or more time? But here's a deep question: what if the real obstacle isn't that you're not ready, but that you don't trust yourself enough? What if everything you need to become the person you want to be is already within you, and the only thing holding you back is your belief that it's not? Let's talk about belief. Most of the time, we wait for external validation before we believe we're capable of change. We think, once I get that promotion, then I'll feel confident, or once I lose the weight, then I'll feel good about myself. But that's backward. The real shift happens when you stop waiting for external proof and start believing in yourself first. Change starts from the inside out. So how do you make that shift? It starts with small, consistent actions. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Begin with one small change that aligns with the person you want to be. Maybe it's waking up earlier, or reading more, or simply being kinder to yourself. Each small action reinforces the belief that you are capable of change. And here's the kicker: as you begin to act like the person you want to be, you become that person. It's not about waiting for some future version of yourself to magically appear. It's about taking steps right now to become that version. So, ask yourself, are you ready to stop waiting and start becoming? Because the person you want to be is already inside you. You just need to let them out.